Welcome, geeks, to one more episode of Next Week in History, a program that quenches your curiosity and feeds your hunger for entertainment. Thanks once again for all the support, guys. The program is getting more and more views, step by step, and we're picking up new subscribers. So really, we need your support, so thank you, guys. Monday, November 30th. November 30th marks the 180th birthday of Samuel Langhorne Clemens, aka Mark Twain. He was not a vampire, so of course he's long dead now, but he's still alive in his books. He wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and its sequel, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and trust me, he's one of the greatest American writers. He has two things also that maybe you did not know about him. First, he was a lover of the occult. He believed that he had psychic powers, which he called mental telegraphy. For example, he had a premonition of his brother's death, and he even predicted that his own death would come shortly after the passing of the Halley Comet. The second fact is that he loved science. He was a great friend of Nikola Tesla, and he was an inventor himself, but not a very successful one, I have to say. He lost most of his money building things, but he had one world-changing creation, and you won't see this coming because Mark Twain is the father of the brass strap. Yes, ladies. November 30th also marks another important birth, a Nobel Prize-winning writer who is way more famous for being a colonel, politician, and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during World War II, Winston Churchill. Churchill was among the first people to notice the dangers of the Nazi movement, refused to surrender, and defended the UK in the darkest hour. His speeches helped inspire the British people to resist, and working together with Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin, he managed to turn the tide of the war in favor of the Allies. But history always has a dark side. Churchill was a true imperialist and a believer of white supremacy, which made him clash with Gandhi in India and even President Obama's grandfather in Kenya. The first one, he tried to let die of hunger. The second one, he imprisoned and tortured for 2 years without a trial. Okay. Happy birthday? Another great event of November 30th is the release in 1982 of Thriller, Michael Jackson's second solo album and still today the best-selling record album in history, with over 65 million copies worldwide. Before that album, Michael Jackson had declared that he wanted to be the biggest star in the show business. He felt undervalued by the music industry and considered that he was being discriminated by magazines and the MTV for being black. Well, this album changed all that. He won a record-breaking 8 Grammy Awards, he marked a new era for music videos, and he was established as the king of pop. Ouch! Tuesday, December 1st. Let's start December 1st in 1887 when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle published A Study in Scarlet, the first story about the greatest detective of all time, Sherlock Holmes. The story initially did not gain much attention, but from 1891, Holmes and Dr. Watson's short stories grew in popularity. In total, Holmes was featured in 4 novels and 56 short stories by Conan Doyle. And did you know that not even once in those 60 stories did Holmes say, "Elementary, my dear Watson"? Yeah, that came afterwards, in other books featuring the detective and in more than 200 films, making Sherlock Holmes the most portrayed movie character according to the Guinness World Record. What's so special about Holmes, you ask? Well, he's very magnetic. He combines eccentricity and great powers of deduction with great fighting and disguise skills. He's also morally ambiguous. Sure, he does good things, but he can truly be an ass. And actually, his character has inspired many other fiction characters such as Gregory House, Adrian Monk, Patrick Jane, and even partly inspired the creation of Batman. Oh yeah! December 1st commemorates also another very different fighter for justice. On this day, 60 years ago, Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old black seamstress, was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama after defying the law by refusing to give up her seat to a white man that had just boarded the city bus. Was that against the law? Hell yeah! Buses were segregated and there was a white-only section. And when more whites needed seats, blacks were to move to seats in the rear, stand, or just get the heck out of the bus. Not only that, if white people were already sitting in the front, black people had to board at the front to pay the fare, then go down and re-enter through the rear door. What? That's messed up. So Parks' arrest sparked a year-long boycott of the buses by blacks and launched the civil rights movement in the United States. Rosa Parks became an international icon of resistance to racial segregation, and she organized and collaborated with civil rights leaders such as Edgar Nixon and Martin Luther King Jr. And although widely honored in later years, she also suffered a lot for her act. She was fired from her job as a seamstress, she had to leave town because no one would ever offer her a job, and she received death threats for years afterwards. But that never stopped her, and she's a great example that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Wednesday, December 2nd. On December 2nd, 1804, the whole of France was on a celebration mood as Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself at Notre Dame Cathedral as Emperor of the French, becoming the first French emperor in 1,000 years. And yes, he crowned himself. The Pope was there, ready with the crown, but he was like, "Grandpa, give me that crown, eh?" He was too cool to be crowned by anyone else. But why becoming an emperor, you ask? Well, just months before that day, his police had uncovered an assassination plot against him to restore the monarchy to the Bourbons. So he said, "You want royalty? I will give you royalty. Bam! I am freaking royalty now." So Napoleon, just like that, dominated European affairs for over a decade. He won most of the battles he fought, and although he finally was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, he's still considered one of the greatest commanders in history. In modern history, December 2nd brings nightmares to many people because on this day in 2001, Enron filed for Chapter 11 in one of the largest corporate bankruptcies in US history. It's a story of greed and fraud that wiped out many people's savings and pensions. The story here is pretty simple actually. Enron was a huge conglomerate but was actually losing money. But nobody likes losing money, so the executives started hiding those losses, pretending that they were doing an awesome job, so the stock price kept going up. But the executives knew that shit was going on, so they started selling their own stock, making a ton of money. Then people started having some doubts, but the executives were like, don't fear, we're making an awesome job, buy. And people and employees trusted them, so they kept buying. Meanwhile, executives kept secretly selling their stocks, taking home $1.1 billion. Not only that, days before this was discovered, Enron paid $55 million in bonuses to the top executives because, yeah, they were doing such a great job. You make me sick, people. And sure, after all hell broke loose, the top management ended up in jail, but there was little consolation for the millions of Americans that had lost a chunk of their savings because of what they did. So conclusion, if you have savings, give them to me. Thursday, December 3rd. Let's go to 1989 when on this day Presidents Bush, Father and Gorbachev happily announced the end of the Cold War. Yay! What was the Cold War? Not this. It was a period between the end of World War II and 1989 of high political and military tension between the powers of the West, USA and the capitalist friends, and the powers on the East, the Soviet Union and the communist comrades. It is called Cold War because they did not fight directly. They found other wars and each supported one side, such as in Korea or Vietnam. They also fought with propaganda, spies like James Bond, sports, and they even had a space race to prove who was the smartest. But why not just fight directly, you ask? Well, they were ready, but each side was scared shit of the other side's nuclear weapons. If war started, it would mean a mutually assured destruction. There were two big crises actually, the Berlin blockade in 1948 and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, and we were that close to a total nuclear war. Luckily, they kept the guns down, and with the fall of the Soviet Union, USA became the world's only superpower for the time being. December 3rd also marks the day in 1994 when Sony launched their first game console, the PlayStation! Sony was new to the industry, but the console ended up selling more than 100 million units and started a series that includes PlayStation 2, 3 and 4, PS1 and PSP. Funnily enough, Nintendo was involved in the early development of PlayStation with a joint venture with Sony, but Nintendo then got greedy and had second thoughts because they felt the contract gave way too much to Sony, so they stabbed them in the back and cancelled the project and started working with Philips. And Sony said, okay, let's try to go get Sega on board. And Sega was, no way, you suck! So finally Sony said, you know what, we will do it on our own. And Nintendo and Sega were like, yeah, woohoo, we are so scared. So when Sony launched an awesome console with top 3-dimensional graphics, kick-ass price, and games on a CD format that could be easily pirated, well, they got what they deserved. PlayStation became the market leader in just 1 year and now controls more than 50% of the market, while Nintendo keeps just 20% and Sega is not even a player anymore. Friday, December 4th. Let's go way back in time to the Frankish Empire, because on December 4th, on the year 771, Charlemagne became the sole ruler of the empire after the death of his brother. If you have never played Age of Empires, you might not know who Charlemagne or the Franks were, so here goes a quick summary. The Franks were the biggest civilization in Western Europe during the early Middle Ages. Charlemagne was the most successful king, and he's often referred to as the father of Europe since through his conquest, he laid the foundations to modern France and Germany. He was also king of Italy, and on the year 800, he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope. He ruled Europe through his family, appointing his sons as kings here and there, pure mafia style. His daughters, though, were not that lucky. He did not want them to get married to avoid succession problems, so he kept them at home, where he could keep an eye on them, and never let them have an official family. Shit! December 4th also marks 3 important birthdays. On 1969, Jay-Z, a guy that went from dealing drugs on his teens to hip-hop guru, successful entrepreneur, sports agent, and one of the world's best-selling artists of all time, which has made him super rich. On top of that, he's married to Beyoncé, so you cannot get much luckier than that. Then we have Tyra Banks, born in 1973. She's a model extraordinaire, original Victoria's Secret angel, and now producer and host of the never-ending show America's Next Top Model, 22 freaking seasons already. She made popular the world's smile with your eyes. And finally, in 1954, we have the birthday in Miami of Burger King, McDonald's arch enemy and father of the Whopper. So we have good music, good looks, and happy birthday to you all. Saturday, December 5th. December 5th is a big day in entertainment history. On a sad note, it marks the death at the young age of 35 of composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in 1791. Mozart is probably the most talented child prodigy in the history of music. Yes, girls, even more than Justin Bieber. He could read music before he could read words, and he started composing from the age of 5 when he was already a pro, playing the keyboard and the violin in front of European royalty. However, despite being the best pianist of his generation and the most famous composer in Europe by age 20, he spent most of his life looking for a job and died without any money. That sucks. Well, did you know that Mozart's music has been credited with helping those with epilepsy, boosting the milk production of cows, and boosting the IQ of unborn babies? There's even a Swiss sewage treatment center that claims that Mozart can help microbes break down sewage waste. So next time you have to do the dishes, just play some Mozart, sit down, and let the magic happen. The other big event on December 5th is the birth in 1901 of Walt Disney. And of course, I don't need to introduce the guy. He and his staff created characters such as Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Minnie and Goofy. In fact, Disney himself was the original voice of Mickey. Disney created the world's first full-length animated movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and people thought that he was crazy, but then the movie went on to become the biggest success of the year, sparking the golden age of animation and allowing Disney to start building his empire. Did you know that during his lifetime, Disney won 22 Academy Awards and 4 honorary Academy Awards, giving him by far more Oscars than any other person in history? He also built the first Disneyland and started developing Disney World. Disney died in 1966 due to a lung cancer, probable result of his smoking addiction, but it is rumored that Disney was frozen cryonically so he could be revived sometime in the future. But that is completely false. Or is it? Sunday, December 6th. December 6th is celebrated in many regions of the world as St. Nicholas Day, a day when St. Nicholas is supposed to leave little presents in children's shoes. Who is St. Nicholas, you ask? As you might have guessed, he is the historical person that inspired the figure of Santa Claus. He was a 4th century Christian saint and the bishop of Myra in modern-day Turkey. Turns out that besides supposedly working several miracles, this guy had a reputation for secret gift-giving, such as putting coins in the shoes of those who left them out for him. His legendary miracles are not for the faint-hearted. One legend tells how during a terrible period of hunger, a butcher lured 3 little children into his house where he killed them, placed their remains in a barrel to cure, and planned to sell them off as ham. St. Nicholas, though, saw through the butcher's horrific crime and resurrected the 3 boys from the barrel with his prayers. Yeah, that's scary. There are also many stories of miracles that help sailors, so he has a big following among sailors and was described by some time as Lord of the Sea in a similar way as Poseidon was in antique Greece. So wouldn't it be more badass if Santa rode on a sledge pulled by sharks? Hey, it's just a suggestion, guys. And talking about riding, December 6 also marks the day in 1897 when London became the world's first city to host licensed taxis. Here is a short intro to the amazing story of the taxicab. First came the original hackney carriage in the 17th century, drawn by 2 horses. Then appeared the hansom cab in the 19th century that could be drawn by just 1 horse. That was finally replaced by the gasoline-powered taxicab in the early 20th century, and finally all that is getting replaced by Uber in the 21st century. Yeah, it's quite boring, but in between all that we can find thousands of different types of cabs: bright yellow, pink, luxurious, shitty, new, old, taxi boats, coco taxis, tuk-tuks. So if you take a taxi on December 6th, why don't you explain this story to the driver and try to get a free ride to celebrate? Taxi drivers are always so nice and warm, so I'm sure it will work. And with that money-saving tip, we end this episode of Next Week in History. Please leave your comment below and vote for your most favorite moment of the week. Thanks for watching, guys, and remember, with coconuts, be happy, have fun, and let's go nuts! See you soon, geeks!